started filming. This is a presentation for Samba on OS2 and eComStation. I'm Neil Waldhauer. I'm an OS2 and eComStation consultant for those two people who still need such a service. And I am not involved in the development of Samba or supporting of Samba for OS2 and eComStation. I'm just an end user. I found a little barrier between the developers who seem to know this well and couldn't see any problem with using it, and end users who just basically couldn't get started. And so I was sort of in the middle of those two groups, so I thought this is the perfect presentation for me to do. I use Samba every day. Next slide please. Okay, Samba comes with two varieties, the client and the server. The client is just for you to use other people's computers that have shared resources, and you're on your computer. That's installed in eComStation by default, so most users can get that running, and so they can use shared files on other computers. But they're not able to share their files, which is probably more useful. And so this presentation is mainly going to be about the server side of eComStation. Next slide, please. Samba is there as a newer version of the IBM File and Print Services. File and Print Services was the best file sharing of its day, but that day was a long time ago. And it's evolved, and IBM didn't keep it up. So we have Samba now to pretty much replace that. For a lot of the consulting work I use, I have to keep file and print services because the application was built in the 80s or 90s, and it's still running.
Can that connect to Samba servers?
They do not work well together. You can get limited connectivity between them. According to the porters, it's not supported. And my experience with it is that as long as the directory, all the information about the files, fits into a 64K block, then it will work. So if a directory with more than 170 files in it, and it will no longer work. And results are unpredictable. I quickly wrote who I knew worked on this, Paul Smedley, Alex Taylor, and all the guys at Bitwise. Later on, I'll have a more complete list of the people who worked on it. Next slide, please. The documentation is thin for our product. I've been using this book to sort of beef up my knowledge of Samba. We are a port of it, so not everything in the book works, and some things work differently. But it's better than nothing. Samba 2nd edition is free online. Samba 3rd edition is part of the new Safari bookshelf, and so you need a subscription to view that. You can view it free for a few weeks, and then you have to pay.
Neil, is one version or the other more accurate?
I think they're about the same. None of them take into account any OS2 or eComStation features. What I found it most useful for was I was having a lot of trouble at first getting the GUI to operate, and so I would just hand edit my configuration files, and those books, even the oldest one, is very useful for that. And for people who would prefer to operate their computer by hand editing configuration files, which is a substantial subset, this is your guide. So next slide, please. The Samba for ECS website. This is probably one of the best websites on NetLab. It has a lot of information on it. There's gaps, and perhaps after I finish with this presentation, I will try to fill in some of those gaps and submit this to them. I am using these versions of the Samba server because that, when I started, that was the version I had, and then once I had it in production, I didn't want to change it. There are newer versions in beta. I don't know how the development of Samba works. It's Bitwise has many things on their plate, and so this isn't really one of their top items. It works pretty well. So they're, they'll fix a bug, but it's not, they're not really trying to get to a general release.
Is that relatively current though, that release? What's the highest number that other platforms have?
I think we're a few years behind. And the betas are much closer. But
I mean, is there a version
it's not
2?
Is there a version? I don't know. I don't know what the current version
The
is.
Samba server versions here don't really correspond with the version, the actual version of Samba. So Samba server OS2, version 1.04, is based on Samba 3.0 something.
Yeah, 3.
Oh.
Isn't it 3.3 or 3.0?
Yeah, 3.3,
3.3.
3.5 is
Yeah.
available. 3.6 is
Right,
like
subtract
a
two.
FTP site.
Well, I don't know if we have a client version of 3.6.
Yeah.
I had to build my own 3.6 server.
Oh, okay.
So I don't think it's actually got a release of 3.6 available. for
Yeah,
the server.
that's not up on an FTP site for us to try.
I don't think so. I had to build it from
And-
this beginning.
And we don't have a Samba 4 server.
Yeah,
We have a Samba 4 client.
Yeah.
not a Samba 4
Lewis has been, and Paul have been working on that Samba 4 client, and I've tried that, had success with it against my server at this version. So the different versions should interoperate. And this old version, the stable one that I found, is good enough to work with my Macintosh, my Windows, my iPhone. It does the job for that. I'm not even sure what the newer releases give you. I think actually Lewis will cover some of the things the newer releases might give you on his presentation.
I don't have actual, I don't have real slides specific to Samba versus Kerberos,
Yeah.
setting that up, but I'll talk about the Samba 4 stuff.
So, to briefly summarize, if you have a Windows network with Active Directory, it has security requirements that this does not meet. Your own Windows machine at home probably is okay, or you can adjust it to be okay.
Yeah.
I think set the temperature environment variable is really supposed to be in the installation section, but I was, going along with the documentation as presented on their website, and so that's sort of near the very top. Before you get down into, what are you installing? Oh, set that environment. So I have just echoed their unusual way of presenting that. Next slide, please. Oh, I think we went to. Back up? Oh, there we go. Okay. This just shows the installation files there. If you download this presentation and are ready to go through and install, you make sure you have the same ones I have, just to make sure you get the same results. Next slide, please. Okay. Install the REXX libraries first, then the Samba server. The Samba server install program depends on the REXX libraries. So this is very important that you install them in that order. Also, next slide, please. Oh, okay. I was jumping ahead there. At the end of their thing, the reason it depends on the REXX libraries is it runs the configuration screen to let you set the administrator password. If that doesn't run, you're going to be left with a Samba installation with no password. But it also doesn't run because none of the tools are going to run right because you've installed the prerequisites incorrectly. This held me up for quite some time.
Neil, let me ask you a follow-up question then. Both packages are WPIs.
Yeah.
Is there nothing in this Samba server installation WPI that reminds you that the REXX libraries are a prerequisite?
There is, but you can just pop over it.
Yeah.
And because it's on a very long page, you're getting the license or credits or something up front, and then you go, oh, if I just scrolled down, it would have said. Yeah. I had to figure it out without that handy reminder within the WPI, which I'll show on this. I did scroll down in the presentation. And due to my failure, I could just rerun it, and then it would have set up the prerequisites correctly. So that worked for me for a while until I found out why I needed to repeat it. Just sort of handing that as a possible, because a lot of people are just trying to install this and getting nowhere. And so I thought, let me go step by step. Next slide, please. Okay, this is just the REXX files required by Samba. As you go through it, it tells you what to do. Next slide, please. Okay, the packages are the REXX runtime, because they're all written in REXX. Add-ons, Alex Taylor and Chris. How do you say it? Volkenmuth. And those are add-ons for the GUI. Paul Ratcliffe's libraries, and they actually, all the rest of them are just supporting libraries for various things that they do. I've used all those libraries for one reason or another, but I never really bothered to install them all in one place. I'm not sure how we do distributions with something like this. This piles them all into the ECSDLL directory. I think we'll have another presentation on, well, managing all those DLLs is a problem. But next slide, please. Okay. Samba server, once you have the REXX libraries correctly installed, just install Samba, and this sort of introduces you to the open source Samba. I want to just go on a little trip here. When eComStation looked like we could sort of free ourselves from the IBM code, we thought of various parts of the product where we don't have source code, we don't have any way of even entering a bug for it. What are we going to do? And file and print services was one of them. And so I think the initial port was done with the idea that, we can free ourselves of one of these roots that's anchoring OS2 to its old roots, and that's the file and the file sharing and printer sharing. Maybe not so important today, but there was a reason for doing it. So we have a nice port. Next slide, please. Okay, here's the prerequisites. Please make sure you have all the DLLs installed right there, but it's very easy to just hit that next button. It actually looks for all of them. I think this is a nice thing to do with your Warpin. If you are writing a Warpin installer, go and check for your prerequisites and say where you found them. Maybe people are just going to next through it, but this is a really nice resource for when you say, did I get the right version of that library? Which one am I using? So that's why I brought this page up. It says you'll be offered to create a new configuration or migrate your IBM peer configuration. I have not tried this migration, and I don't think it's worth it.
I probably wouldn't
Yeah.
do that. I mean, unless you've got 50 users already configured in IBM peer, you don't want to have to.
It doesn't do users, though.
It
does do users and groups. So
it just migrates the shares.
yeah, and my experience is those are kind of finicky.
Now, why isn't this in the Warpin thing?
It is.
It is working.
No. The one you said you have to do this before you can do the other thing.
Yeah.
Why isn't it in the other thing?
Because,
I always wondered that. Because they can't, or they won't, or they whatever?
well, you don't really want to, from the point of view of, if you put it in there, and now let's say because it's a prerequisite, but if you package it in this package, if that one gets updated, now your package is going to be outdated.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Also, if you install your package again, you'll backlevel.
Backlevel.
Right.
Right.
Which is, well, we'll have another presentation on that. Next slide, please. Okay, here's the bigger list of credits. And I'm not going to be able to pronounce their names correctly. Sylvan Scherer?
Yes.
Yeah. Irving?
Very column finds.
Thank you. Paul Smedley, Yuri Dario, Nikolai Kolosov. And, you know, these guys did a lot of work on this. And, you know, I remember I took an early version of that and put it into a big Windows directory at a corporation. And I almost lost the job. They almost just showed me the door because it kind of ate their whole network. You know, there were bugs. And, you know, they didn't have access to a large network. To be fair, I also found bugs in IBM's. You know, when you have Warp Server e-business, it will try to take over an old-fashioned Windows NT network. And it will take over as the domain administrator, even if you are at a big company, which isn't what they wanted. And I was surprised to find that NT Server had no clue about protecting against that. So, but that's not likely to happen anymore. No one will run NT Server anymore. So, next slide, please. Okay, it's this new general license. I don't know if anybody's concerned about that anymore, but you know, if you are in a situation where you're trying to incorporate Samba into your product and it's new and you compile against it, your stuff is now going to like this too. So be careful.
That depends, by the way, on how you do it. There are some things around that. But
Yeah. So, you know, this was a big issue years ago, and now people know the issues, or most people know the issues, and will not fall into the trap. But there's still people I run into are afraid of open source software for that reason. Next slide, please. Okay, here are the various parts. I do not install SWAT because I have a different web server that I don't know how to run SWAT with. But
Even the Samba team has given up on SWAT.
really, okay.
Samba 4, SWAT, you don't use them.
Okay.
Interesting, I use it a lot. Don't have any real problems with it.
Yeah, but you have to run it on an Apache, do you? No.
I'm running it on Apache.
Okay. Yeah.
I may have been why I installed Apache or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. You know, someday I'll get to the point of running multiple web servers on my machine and have Apache run that.
I never tried it under Web 2, which is what I was using before.
Yeah.
I just didn't even try it.
Very good. Okay. Well, those are the parts. We'll see them later. Next slide, please. Okay. It does modify the config sys and change workplace shell objects. That's okay. Next slide, please. Okay. And Unix root. Now, I've certainly seen a lot of people who are afraid to get into the Unix root world of things, but you know, in this case, it's just an environment variable and a few files that they've put in. It doesn't mean you're committing to the entire YUM RPM world. Although, personally, I have, and I think it's a good idea, but, you know.
Well, Unix root existed long before the RPM YUM. I mean, it was being used by the, I believe it was even being used by the X11 software.
Okay, that makes sense. That seemed to be the world it was coming from. Although EMX didn't really.
EMX didn't use it, but the X11
Yeah,
did.
yeah, okay. And then later on, our various Unix-alike packages started using Unix root, which, you know, good, fine. You should have an environment variable for that. All right, next slide, please. Okay. If you're doing an upgrade, it is even smart enough to kill the server for you. I think that's a nice thing that they've done. Next slide, please. Okay, it's huge. It installs. I don't know why I put that there. Next slide, please. Okay. If you're doing a new install, make sure you go ahead and create new smb.conf and ln hosts. I don't know that I need a backend, but you know, if you're doing an upgrade install, uncheck those, or you'll eliminate your configuration. That's not that clear from the screen. I mean, you should know that, but that would be one place to go wrong. Next slide, please. Okay. If you get to this screen where you're setting the root password, then I think you have successfully installed the prerequisites, because this is no longer part of Warpin, but actually part of their GUI. So, and you know, the root password is typically something you want people not to guess, but you know, if you're in a really open situation, they'll make it easy to guess. I don't know. I have not tried do not create a root account. I assume eventually you're going to need it. And as for the back end to use, I just leave it with the default. I really haven't tried to get into any strange stuff at the back end. And then hit create default configuration, default configuration. I suppose I ought to tell them they've got too many defaults in there. All right, next slide, please. Okay, and then I like to have the thing running when I start up the machine, and so it won't start correctly right at first. So that I just said sleep 10 and then start Samba.
You said what?
In other words, I sleep for 10 seconds before starting Samba. As this is going to be in the startup folder, and it's populating the startup folder. It's doing all kinds of things, and so I just say, hey, wait for 10 seconds for all that to complete. Maybe it's just my network situation. Maybe you have to adjust that for yours. But so when I use the command line, which I just copied from their program object to start Samba.
Neil, you can probably work around that by putting that in TCP start or TCP exit. I've done that before, and that's probably a flaw also, that the EVFSCLI creates an item in the startup folder that it's not supposed to, because it seems that with some systems booting up that quickly these days with bootable JFS, the IP stack is not yet fully initialized.
Okay.
And then you get a timeout because the LAN interface is probably not up yet.
Okay, and then that TCP wait is the one that they have. Wait until the interface is ready.
Yeah.
And then, okay.
But that's actually put it in your TCP start or TCP exit, because that gets executed when the stack is ready.
Yeah, if it's in TCP exit, then TCP exit won't run until the stack is up.
It's a good,
So that,
good note, yeah.
Is that what you were seeing, or were you seeing something else?
No, that sounds like what I'm seeing.
yeah,
It's
it
not
won't
ready.
start. If it doesn't detect an active network connection, Samba won't come up. So.
Yeah.
I got mine automatically coming up, but I can't remember.
We should probably file a bug with them then, because
Yes.
they've been working on this for years and they have no clue. And they're not paying a lot of attention to it. So if they thought about it hard, maybe they would know. But that's probably something that they could.
Well, it's not necessarily paying attention. Those people are juggling 10 other
Exactly.
things at the same
But
time.
that's what I meant to say. They're very busy and they've got other things to do. And so if this isn't bothering them, it's not a problem on their machine.
So
All right.
you're going to update the handout before you post it?
I probably won't update the handout, but I probably will update the webpage I keep on the Baywar website. So
Okay.
I've been keeping a Samba page on there for a few years as I worked through all the various issues I had with it, and so this is sort of a formalizing of that webpage. Next slide, please. Okay, restart to let everything. I'm going to go to configuration next. Next slide, please. I'm going to go to client. The client software has been revised a few times. It's been some time since we've had a distribution of eComStation, so there are newer versions that have been released. One of the versions of the client that I have changes extended attributes and changes dates on machines just on read. It changes the last write date for a read or a read of the extended attributes. And that's a pretty bad bug for me. I was keeping essentially a system of files based on their date, like make, so it was very bad to have. If I read it, it changed the date. And so I've been very careful to install a new client as soon as I install eComStation. And it's just the NetDrive or EVFS plugin that needs to be replaced. The rest of it can stay with whatever it is. So, all right, and the requirements. In eComStation, you need the EVFS program that comes by default. For OS2, the only option is to use NetDrive to get some.
NetDrive works fine on this.
And it works fine. And I like NetDrive. I'm just saying that if you have OS2, you're going to also need NetDrive. Whereas
The point is, you don't want to install NetDrive and EVFS.
No,
So if you
don't do
switch
that.
over to NetDrive,
Yeah.
running ECS, you should uninstall or disable EVFS.
Really? Okay. What's the risk on that?
I'm not exactly
You
sure.
run a risk because it's basically just about the same device driver underneath the bonnet.
There's a lot of the same identifiers in the two
Okay.
IFSs.
Yeah.
And so you run the risk that either NetDrive or EVFS is going to get confused about which DLL it's called.
Okay.
Okay, for the dummy in here, what's EVFS?
eComStation virtual file system,
Okay.
which is
Yeah.
essentially NetDrive, but only for Samba.
Okay.
NetDrive will allow you to install a Samba plugin, an FTP plugin, a crypto plugin, all sorts of different file systems. EVFS only does Samba.
Yeah, good. I probably should explain. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, installation files, and I just give these to, these are the ones I'm using now. There are other levels that are available, but I sort of want to say, I've been successful with these, you know, so if you have trouble, try this set. Next slide, please. Okay, once the server's installed, this is the folder of files that it creates. Next slide, please. Simple Samba Configuration Center does most of the work for shared directories and printers. I have not been using shared printers very much. My printers are already, you know, on the network, and I don't need to use them in this way. It'd probably be interesting because,
As printers have become smarter,
yeah,
the need for servers to manage them has essentially decreased.
yeah,
But because the current support in Samba has just remained
yeah.
fairly consistent from version to version.
Okay. So they're not developing it very hard.
I don't know that there have been any real enhancements in that area. Most everyone I know in a commercial environment has moved off of having servers control print queues and what have you. So
Yeah.
But is it not a disadvantage, because if you have every workstation, you have a printer queue configured to point manually to that printer, and the printer blows up in the network, and you push new one in, or you change something in the IP address. Putting it on the server at least enables you to control the final destination.
Well, and you can configure pools of printers. So for instance, you can have 5 laser jets pointing to one Samba share.
Yeah.
And so then the Samba server determines which printer is free to print the job.
Okay.
There are advantages in extremely large environments. Just
Yeah.
like, I mean, as a Novell guy, NetWare does printer management fabulously like that, where you've got a pool of a dozen laser printers, and you've got 500 people who need to print a job, and no one knows which laser's free, but you let the server figure that out. Samba printer sharing works well in that environment, but in smaller environments, with intelligent printers like we have now, it's not as...
I think Roderick's point is good even for a home network. You know, in a home network, your printer will eventually blow up.
Yeah.
All right, next slide. Users and groups. I just wanted to show this screen. You know, as home users, you probably do want to configure users for every actual person in the house. Next slide, please.
And it has its own little world of users unbeknownst to anyone else, like?
It does.
Okay.
It does. And there is some relationship to the Unix users, but we don't use the
Even
Unix
on
users very much.
Unix systems, your system users may be entirely different from your Samba users.
Yeah, but there's no way to convert the IBM file and print users to these users, so
That I
it's pretty much
I
starting
really
over.
didn't know.
All right, status monitor. I use this just to start and stop the thing because, you know, is it running? You know, that's what I really want to. Is it running? So, yeah, easy enough.
And there's a nice little X-Center widget for that with a green light and a red light.
Yeah, I've tried that, and I'm too stupid to look at it, so. Apparently. So I went back to this. Next slide, please. I'm just going through the various things. Reload configuration to make a new configuration. I have not used this. You know, I don't make that many configuration changes. Next slide, please. Again, controlling the server. I should just, you know, maybe use their icon in the box, but I like the GUI monitor because, you know, rather than just click this and it does a command line and disappears, I can see the result of my action, so it's more natural to use. Next slide, please. Okay, directly edit smb.conf. That's handy if you can't remember where it was, to just have it in the folder there. You know, it's probably easier to find things just editing it that way, and you know, you can cut and paste. Find SMB CFS machines. Our client with network neighborhood and all those things works well enough that I've never used that. So if I was going to try to run some automated thing to do it, something to every machine, I would, but I haven't so far. Next slide, please. Resources. I wanted to pull out a couple of things that helped me during this development. You know, we were having discussions, and do you remember the guy with the OS2 release notes?
That's Greg Shaw.
Greg Shaw. Yeah, he's put together a number of nice presentations on various OS2 topics, and his is pretty good, and goes in for Windows orientation that I don't have since I rarely use Windows. You know, I just don't have enough of an orientation like that. You know, one time I got on a Windows 7 box and said, oh, good, it works, you know. I was done. So, and then OS2 World has had really good discussions on it, although kind of short on conclusions, but it raises issues, and so it's been very helpful for me to, you know, oh, did I think of that? Did I try that? And so it's full of ideas to try. Next slide, please. Okay. Somewhere along the line, I discovered the EVFS command line. I think it was because I didn't know about the TCP start thing, and I was trying to figure out how am I going to actually mount a resource at boot time, since it doesn't work in the GUI. So I repeat the errors that they made with the command line, and then, you know, adjust the delay to something that worked in my system. Something that didn't work for them. I don't know why. There's something, they have a delay built into their software, but I never got it to work. You know, it delayed fine, but it never actually made any networking. So, so these are the commands. They're not documented on their website or in any of their doc files, but if you are on the command line and just type EVFSCLI, it will, you know, print out some kind of, you know, help that way on the command line. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm just, you know, going through a lot of these. So this is how you attach a drive letter, and then you attach a resource to the drive letter. Next slide, please. I'm not even sure what this one does. I put it in there because they had it. Next slide. Create mount point. You can mount many resources to a directory rather than a drive letter. That's an enhancement over the file and print client, although it's something that NetDrive can do for any of its networking methods.
So you first create a drive that's just hanging out there for use for this kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Do you have to create a drive? Can you mount to like a disk drive? I don't know. I've not tried it. But if you wanted to create a drive and then attach lots and lots of networking to that drive, you'd use the mount point method. Next slide.
Yes, you can do that, because you can also use, if there's anybody using the NTFS drive that's built into eComStation, I recommend you don't use it, but go with the NetDrive software. And there is an NTFS drive plugin, and a local NTFS volume by a NetDrive.
Sure. Sure. I was saying, if you already have a real disk drive, C, can you mount the network resources as C, Samba, something? I don't know. I haven't tried it. Delete mount point, naturally just like create mount point, except backwards. Next. Detach to undo your drive letter. You gotta have all these parts. Next. Okay, mount. This is the one where you actually mount the resource, and it's pretty complicated. And I had to work through the details of this, and I'm going to give an example, and then a way to cheat. So, type of resource, Samba, or SMBFS, I think. Type mount point that you just created. The resource description, various flags. The resource description is a very long string, and in no way is this adequate to describe it. Next slide. Oh, okay. Query, I still don't know. Oh, query mount. I meant to try this before I got here. Well, sorry. No idea what query is.
It tells you what share is mounted to that.
Oh, okay. Very good.
So if you want to, if you remember, well, I know I mounted S to something, but what the heck is it? And what
Now,
machine
net
is that?
view or net use.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. So just like net use. I really would be nice to have a table of all of these versus the IBM file and print client that many OS2 users are very familiar with. Just to say, well, you were typing this, now type this.
Or write a program that turns that into this.
Yeah, I found the danger of that. They originally had net as the command instead of
Yeah.
and well, we already had net, and then like if I'd installed Samba client, now my file and print client doesn't work anymore from the command line. Or I can fix it now. Now Samba doesn't work, so it was a poor choice. So if you don't have it at all, then you'd never net would be fine, and you probably could just alias net to some of this. But next slide, please. Refresh. I've seen this in Windows, but I never really.
Well, remember that there's some caching that goes on.
Okay.
And you can, instead of waiting for the timeout on the cache, you can immediately recache the directives.
This isn't like a drive goes inactive and that just makes it active again.
No, that's the reconnect. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
The whole sleeping problem is a different issue.
Okay, thanks. Next slide, please. Mount, you just the opposite of mount. A lot easier. Next slide, please. Okay, oh, wait. Probably just in case you don't have sleep.
I don't know what the wait command, the wait time
Yeah,
does.
retries, yeah.
I think that maybe when you've mapped a drive and it doesn't respond,
Okay.
maybe the other machine's gone to sleep.
Yeah.
And what it will do is it will retry.
Okay, wait, retry.
Instead of telling you that the drive is unavailable.
Yeah.
It'll look like it'll hang, but really it's waiting for the response from the other side.
Okay, fair enough. All right, next slide, please. There we are. There's the command line example. This is the EVFS command. So it was SMBFS was the mount type, and then the drive letter and directory, and then the rest is, except for the last trailing W there, is the resource description. And you go, where did that resource description come from? But I figure Samba knows how to make one of those. So I go into, the first time I network, I just go in and connect my resources, save it as a file. And the file is the text file with the resource description in it. So, and cut and paste and there. So, it's kind of a mess. You would never guess, or if you had to type that in yourself, I doubt you would get it right. At least I wouldn't. All right. This is to net use our servo keep JFS. That would with password. That would be analogous. That was the basic command, and use the network resource from the command line in OS2. This is the equivalent, and it's a mess. So but knowing that all of the messy part is already calculated for you and in a file you can save is good. All right. slide, please. All right. I originally had the configuration file in the presentation, but it doesn't fit in a slide format very well. There's nothing simple to say about the configuration file. It has everything that you could set in the GUI, and it's quite long. It's fairly obvious, if you know what you're looking for, it's right there, and it's pretty easy to edit. So, especially if you have a resource and just want to clone it, have a similar resource somewhere else, it's pretty easy to just walk around it. But the GUI tools work well too. So, depending on what you like to do, how you like to use your computer thing. All right. And where is it located? Right, in the etc directory. That's the OS2 etc directory, not the Unix root etc directory. Unfortunately, some of the files for Samba are located in each etc directory. So you'll have to look in two places, one for users in the Unix root etc directory, and one for the rest of the configuration in the nptn etc by default, although you can move it.
In the subdirectory Samba.
In the subdirectory Samba.
So if you have smb.conf in et cetera itself, that would be.
Yeah. All right, next slide, please. This is the shared directories. How do you work with shared directories? By default, it will share every directory you've got. So when you say create default configuration, it has created every drive in your system is shared, even the CD drive. So next slide, please. Okay, so when you click on one of them, there isn't really much configuration you can do with it. You can make it read-only, undo browsable, undo guest access. I guess hide files works.
Hide files? I haven't tried.
I'm thinking, gee, that'd be really good for Mac users. That's something to try. Can I hide all those files that the Mac drops all over your Samba share? That'd be a nice service. Next year. Next slide, please.
This is next.
Oh.
Since you say next year, so next slide. That's the only English word I know. Next.
You read my mind. All right. It does share printers. It shares every printer on my system. Sharing the ePDF drive probably wasn't such a great idea. That creates a PDF on my local system, and it uses a GUI to do it. So if you were to share that and somebody used it, you just have random windows popping up on your server system. Yeah. Just because it can do it doesn't mean it makes sense. So next slide, please. Users and groups. This is the default that you get when you just say create defaults. Next slide, please. There's an add second administrator. I always like to have myself as administrator. For a wide open network, that's what you want to do. Just be administrator. Let anything do anything to your network. Next slide, please. All right. Add a regular user. Pretty much the same thing, but yeah, I haven't tried all the options on this at all. In particular, I don't know. The home directory is probably a whole chapter of that, or several chapters of that book, and I have not bothered to wander into that.
Yeah.
This is kind of obsolete. That's not how we use the computers anymore. All right, next slide, please. Yeah, after adding those users, it populates the list. I haven't really worked with groups very much, so I kind of skipped that in this presentation. Yes?
2 minutes.
2 minutes, thank you. Next slide, please. All right. I've been working on this for some time, and I have found this to be a really nice thing to do for your tablets and phones. You got your OS2 system, you've been keeping all your data on it for years. Now you can take this, your portable devices, install File Browser on iOS, or I'm sure there's equivalents on Android, and these these things will link up to things to open all your files on your OS2 system, giving you, pretty decent access to everything on your OS2 system from your phone or tablet. To me, that's a pretty huge benefit. Some of our, for example, media players are twitchy. They're a lot better on that now, on a phone or tablet. I have not tried to share this over the entire internet. I think it's a bad idea. I went into my firewall and blocked everything. It's like, I'm not even going to try. But I imagine you could. I just don't think it's a good idea.
Yeah, theoretically, you could open everything wide to the world.
Right. And, very nice. And they give me all that bandwidth to use. They don't charge me per megabyte. So. All right. And I haven't tested with Android. It's on my shopping list, but I haven't got there yet. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Any comments, questions?
There is
I've
a
been using it for quite a while on the server side,
Yeah.
and I've got a little script that runs on about 700 machines. It just downloads one file, uploads 1 to 2 other files. And I've been running for a while, I think 3.3 or whatever. And I upgraded to 3.5 and was running for a while. All of a sudden it started locking up. Locking the whole machine up. I mean, hard lock.
The server machine.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So I went back to 3.3 thinking maybe there's something in 3.5.
Yeah.
It still was locking up. That's why I'm at 3.6 now. 3.6.9 is working. If I go to the newest version, it locks up as well. I don't know what, I haven't figured out what it is yet, but it locks the
TDP
machine
corruption.
hard. Well, maybe, but 3.6.9 doesn't do it. And originally I was thinking TDP corruption, because you'd go in there and delete, the corrupt ones I could tell were corrupt. And but the thing was is that it'd come back up and run just fine.
Is there anything pop-up overflows up? Is there a crash somewhere?
Not that I can find, but the thing is it hard locks the machine. I'm talking, I've got a power.
How much use do you have to have? You said 700 clients are
Yeah.
using this thing. And that must mean a big user list, huh?
I've only got one user.
Okay, only one user.
I've got it set up for, the script just uses a single user, connects in, downloads a file, uploads a file, and checks to see if another file's there. If not, it prompts for some
So
information.
TDP corruption would be with a one-user database?
Yeah, I mean,
Okay, could happen.
but
Yeah.
the thing is that when I notice it is primarily is like if it lock up, what would be interesting is when it would lock up, I power it down, power it back up, and it'd run for about 30 seconds to 45 seconds. High CPU as this thing's processing everything, and then it'll block up again. Power it down, bring it back up, it'll process a few hundred more.
Oh, okay.
It'll lock up, and then do that 2 or 3 times, and it'll run for a day or two before it'll, maybe even a week before it'll lock up again. 3.6.9, I haven't had it do that, or if it does, it takes several weeks, because I've seen the thing lock up, but it's after several weeks, and I don't know if it's that, or the Apache, or what's doing it at that point.
Yeah.
But,
I wish I could help you with that, but I'm running other processes on my server that kill it eventually, so.
Have you set up cases on that machine to monitor for any form of shared memory loss that's somewhere leaking away?
well, the only thing, I put like the shared mem thing so I can look at it, and at the point where it locks up,
Steve should be connecting by.
it's not showing
Skype.
the shared memory issues. So I don't know.
Do you have our Skype system?
It's right here.
Okay.
Andy,
Steve-
Unless we're gonna use
Skype
another.
guy.
Yeah, okay, Steve should be connecting in about now.
Okay.